Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by NDIS Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hello everybody, my name is Min and I'm your host from NDIS Property Australia, and you're here listening to the SDA Housing Podcast, a show that explains, highlights, guides and brings awareness about all things SDA in this ever-changing NDIS world. Today we have two special guest speakers, Sarah and Russell from FLEXABILITIES from the Gold Coast. Sarah, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Russell, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you, Min?
So, Russell, I believe you've been listening to our podcast for a while and you're a great follower of what we do. Can you please tell us about any feedback you have on as a listener to our podcast?
Yeah, I think there's always something new going on, like whether it's once a week, you've always got like such a wide range of guest speakers. You don't know what's going to come on next. So it's always a good learning curve for me, always quite interesting, especially being in the NDIS world. You kind of, you sort of get introduced to a new provider of a new thing. Like a few weeks ago, you had on, I think it was Abel, and talking about how he trains the support workers. And I thought that's brilliant, so I can pass that information then on to other providers. So I think as a support coordinator, it's really a handy place to gain knowledge.
That's great to hear. So Sarah, speaking of your FLEXABILITIES business, tell us more about who you guys are, what you represent, and what is a support coordinator, please?
So FLEXABILITIES is a company I started. I myself am a participant of NDIS. I'm a wheelchair user, and I had never heard of support coordination when I had my first plan, and I made a lot of mistakes with my first plan. I chose to self-manage. I didn't realise how complicated that would be and how hard it would be to actually negotiate providers within that space. So coming from being disabled myself, I felt that a lot of the people I spoke to within that space didn't understand what it was actually like to live with a disability. So I started to do support coordination and some advocacy work for people in my position, and it sort of grew from that. I have a background in nursing, so I was a nurse for 20 years, and due to my disability, I had to stop nursing, but I've always been a very strong advocate for children with disabilities because I also have 6 children on the spectrum. So opening up my own company has sort of given me an opportunity to represent disability as a disabled person within this workspace. So it's been a little bit different.
Sarah, can I ask you some personal questions about your family?
Yes, sure.
You were a nurse for 20 years. Yep. You're wheelchair bound. Were you a nurse in a wheelchair, or were you wheelchair bound after?
I actually had
after an accident. Oh.
No, so I've got a degenerative disease, and I was actually nursing. Had worked myself quite high up the ladder I was a nurse educator for cardiothoracic and trauma, and my disease meant that I was no longer able to work, and it was a devastating process. But everything that I went through has really. It's been a learning curve that I'm now utilising in support coordination. And I think if I hadn't gone through that process, I don't think I would be as good as I am now at support coordination.
That's great that you can actually bring your learned life experience that you've gone through yourself into your own business to help others that are in need as well.
Yeah, sure. And that's what makes us a little bit different. So obviously with 6 children on the spectrum, I have contact with disabilities as a parent, and as a disabled person, my own experience, and then from a nursing background, my case management and coordination skills. So it's all sort of come together to this point.
Wow, you have such an amazing journey. I hope that one day Russell can organise a one-on-one interview with you face-to-face to learn more about your life, please. It'll be wonderful to hear more about your life journey for sure.
No need to involve me. Just go for it right now.
So the business, who's in your team? How many participants? Tell us more about the business itself. Yeah.
So FLEXABILITIES is a company that does support coordination level 1, 2, and 3. Russell is my other support coordinator.
What I might ask is, where are you based? That's the first question.
Yeah, so we're based on the Gold Coast, but our clientele are national. So we have clients in Perth, we have clients in Northern Territory, we have clients in Tasmania. Because support coordination is such a varied field, and because there are little pockets of information that you specifically develop. So for us, one of our big specialties that we do here is assistance dogs. So we work with some of the leading assistant dog providers, and we assist people to access assistance dogs via the NDIS funding packages. Now, there aren't many support coordinators that do that. So because of that, we get clients from all over Australia who need assistance dogs but don't know how to do the process.
Question for you. How highly likely will the NDIS fund assistance dogs for participants?
So,
Good question.
loaded question. So there's a couple of problems with accessing assistance dogs at the moment. The main one being that there's not a federal legislation that states what an assistance dog is, but more importantly, how an assistance dog is trained. So the issue with that is that a provider in Queensland applies and has a legislation in Queensland that they have to meet to be a trainer. However, for example, in WA, there is no legislation. So anyone can open up a company and say, I train assistance dogs, train a dog to the level they believe they should be trained at, and sell that dog for $40,000 or $50,000 to a disabled person as an assistance dog. But if you held that up and said, is that dog really complying to some sort of training regulation, some sort of level of skill it has to have, then the answer is no. That makes it very, very hard for the NDIS to approve assistance dogs, because whilst legislation in Queensland is very strict and stringent about who can train a dog, there's none in the other states. So you can imagine a dog trained in WA is not going to be the same quality of the assistance dog as a dog trained in New South Wales or a dog trained in Queensland. Therefore, if there's no standard training for the people that train dogs, then it becomes almost impossible to say, yes, this is a dog and we're going to apply and get it easily. We have a process that we use that we have over the years really honed in. Our quickest assistance dog's been 9 months. The longest one I've heard of has been 3 years. So because of the standard issues, it makes it so complicated. We now have got it down really well. My last 2 dogs that we applied for were both approved prior to the dogs being trained. So we're getting there and the process is really good. But until we address what a qualified dog trainer is for an assistance dog, we're always going to find it a very hard and difficult process. That doesn't mean I don't believe in, I believe that if you require an assistance dog, you should have an assistance dog and the NDI should fund it. Yes, but it just makes it a little bit more difficult.
Okay. That's a great topic. I'd love to pick your brains more in the future about this. What kind of participant disabilities do you see require such assistant dogs in their funding?
So there's a broad range of disabilities. And again, I'm very sort of anti saying what disability. There is no disability that requires an assistance dog. What it is your functional capacity and whether or not an assistance dog can improve your functional capacity. So one disability, I've heard people say, oh, my LAC advised me that you can't have an assistance dog if you have autism. Well, that's not the case, because the assistance dog is given to you on your functionality, not your diagnosis. So some of the things that we see most commonly, obviously, are guide dogs and hearing dogs. But we also have children with autism who we've done assistance dogs. We have people with seizures who have assistance dogs. It's not really an issue. It's about whether or not it's going to meet the needs of the person and whether that is going to decrease what they need from the NDIS over a long period of time, because the life expectancy of assistance dog is 10 years. So with that knowledge, we can say, that means that they don't have to have a support worker from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. because the dog's there to change the TV, get them a drink, pick up their clothes. It's about what the dog can do as a tool for the person.
Gotcha. I don't want to drag this out to be a canine topic, so I won't.
Yep.
What does your business specialize in? You know a lot about assistant dogs, that's for sure. and I'd love to pick your brains out in the future about more of this topic. But what do you and Russell really love doing most about your organisation?
I guess the main thing is putting a safety net around participants. That's what we actually do. We coordinate the plan. So there's 3 different levels of support coordination, and we love to use the community and the family around them as well as providers to put a safety net around them to improve their functional capacity, to improve their life. It's not always about improving funding. We do a lot of that though, but it's about making sure that the funding they do have is the correct funding for them and is individualised as much for what their needs are.
That's one. There's 2 more, right?
So that's what we do. It doesn't matter which level of support you have. So I'll just now say about the 3 levels of support. So there's 3 levels of support coordination. The first level is support connection. And this is support for people who are mostly self-managed, who have had some support coordination before. And it may be that that person requires some links to providers in their area that have availability. It might be somebody who can manage their own providers, but they just need a little bit of help around certain small areas. Level 2 is our biggest range of clients that we have. And they're people that are often not used to the NDIS, have not worked with providers, don't know the legislation, don't know the price guide. We work with them to ensure that they're getting the best out of their plan. The other thing we do for level 2 and level 3 is we prepare all your reports for your NDIS meetings. We make sure that everything is ready to go in when you have a meeting or when you need a plan reassessment. And we make sure we're able to qualify the fund you're asking actually meets your needs, and making sure that you have the documentation and the reasonable and necessary evidence for that.
And I suppose also, just to interrupt, it's about adding to what, or letting them know what is out there for the participants. You know, sometimes you get on the NDIS and you don't know what you're entitled to, what services are out there. So it's kind of our job to not only link them in with the services, but say, look, these are all of the options. You know, let's have a chat and see, what do you really want to do? And making them live as good a life as possible, whether it's getting them out in the environment or changing the environment to suit them. So,
and then level 3 is the highest level of support coordination. And level 3 support coordination is for the more complex, high-need clients, whether that be because of their needs, or at the time it might be a family situation, or because they've become homeless, or whatever. It's a more complex type of support coordination that includes multiple service providers, but also the link between non-NDIS service providers like hospitals, nursing homes, care facilities, and government agencies.
Thank you for the description there of the 3 types of support coordination clients. The sector is really overworked. I think support coordinators are a very critical part of the whole process. I mean, a lot of the community, our listener base on our show, they understand the SDA providers, the SIL providers, but they've never really understood the role of a support coordinator. And I've always been told from various good sources that the key to the process in working with participants are the support coordinators. You got plan managers, support coordinators, care providers. There are a lot of support coordinators out there like yourself who are doing a great, fantastic job in the community for the participants? Or is it we need more support coordinators in the industry? What are your thoughts there?
So I think the biggest barrier as a support coordinator is the fact that people really don't understand our role. So whilst there are support coordinators out there, and, you know, I think we went to a networking meeting earlier this week, and we learned that there's 600 independent support coordinators on the Gold Coast. Yeah, I had no idea how many of us there were. But the other thing is, as a support coordinator, you're not required, there's no job description. There's no training requirements. There's no education out there to train you to be a support coordinator. So if you're an OT, you can go and train to be an OT and you get a university degree, and then you go and do your extra bits. With support coordination for levels 1 and 2, you're not required to actually have any educational or training level. That becomes very difficult because we have some fabulous support coordinators out there that have degrees and really work from the passion of what they do. And then we have other support coordinators that sort of have picked up the job because they were a support worker but wanted to do a little bit more. Or it might be that they have gone into the industry thinking, I'd be really good at this, whatever the reasons they've gone into it. But because there's no level of training you have to have and no courses to do, you sort of really have to learn the job on your feet. And it's a huge barrier because people then don't understand what our role is, because there's a lot of people out there who are support coordinator who don't understand what their role is either. And that makes it really difficult. That need for training and that need for networking and definitely that collaborative sort of working ethic really needs to be fostered and grown within the support coordination industry.
Do you as a business mentor other incoming support coordinators who want to learn more about the role in the industry?
I suppose I would be the first person mentored by Sarah. Yeah, I've only been doing this for a short amount of time, so Sarah's my mentor in this. So everything I know because of her. And then through doing the job, as you say, you kind of learn on your feet. The NDIS role description only gets you so far. There's a lot more involved than what they say is involved if you actually want to do your job to the highest standard.
The other thing I do is, so for example, if a support coordinator contacts me and not from somewhere else and says, I have a client who's interested in getting a dog or getting SGA and I've heard you're, good at doing that, I always teach them to actually do it rather than me taking over the client. I do that for free so that other support coordinators learn how to do dog applications really well or how to put together an SGA coordination package together really well. Rather than taking that job on, I actually teach them to do it. Because I think the more of us that have skills in these areas, the better the participants are going to get services.
I totally agree. And Russell, a bit of free advice for you. I get bombarded, good emails, good bombardment of emails from Team DSC, which is a website. Are you aware of that website, DSC website at all? Take a look at it. It's teamdsc.com.au. There's always a lot of workshops with support coordinators to learn more about the role of support coordination. So I see it all the time. Not relevant to me, but that's my advice to you to check that out and not rely upon Sarah too much because she's very busy. But it's a good place to learn more content for support coordination in Australia from that service.
Yeah, sure, I will. Thank you.
So what's the goal for FLEXABILITIES, Sarah?
I guess the goal is no matter what we do, some people are like, oh, grow your company, get more support coordinators. For me, it hasn't been about that. It's about keeping the individualized personal service, that one-to-one touch that allows me to really support my client as a unit of people, not just one person. And that's always been more important. And that's where I'd like to keep going and just doing that.
Well, that's good because we don't want you overworked yourself because you have 6 kids as well, right? You have an intern here called Russell. So take your time. Don't work too hard and pass as much hard work to him, please.
She tries.
I will do it.
So with the 600 support coordinators in the Gold Coast, do you reckon that number of 600 will increase to 1,000 in the coming years or drop back to more of a balance of, 300-400 long term? What's the market number balance you think for the Gold Coast for SCs?
I actually think there's going to be some really big changes coming into the support coordination role over the next 12 months. There's an indication that they're going to streamline the NDIS service delivery at the consumer end. And one of the things we'll be seeing, I think, is a change in not having guidelines for what support coordinators are and not having some sort of process of saying this is the qualifications you need to be a support coordinator. So I don't think the market will necessarily be met within the next 12 months in numbers. I think, we're always going to need support coordination, but I think the role is going to change. And I certainly think how we do it now, which is more of a case management style, is going to be more prominent over the next 12 months. I think with that, there will be a drop-off of quite a lot of support coordination. There's some talk about, you will have to be registered with the NDIS to be a support coordinator, and that registration process will then highlight training requirements for it. So I think it's going to be a space that's very up and down at the moment. personally believe that anyone who receives the NDIS should have support coordination for the first 2 years, because part of our role is also supplying lots and lots of education to people about what to use their funds on, how to use their funds correctly, how to negotiate contracts, how to self-manage. And that educational component should be in every plan for the first couple of years until people are safe and feel like, my safety net, I can move it a little bit more towards me doing more of this stuff. And I'm hoping that that's what we're going to see over the next 12 months as the NDIS changes.
I agree. I really hope there's more compliance in the sector. As you say, ups and downs. We're going to see the numbers from 570,000 to 1 million in the next 10 years. Half of them are right now kids. So as they become adults, we're going to see a lot more dependence on the support services around the country, being plan managers, care providers, support coordinators, to really step up and deliver that service. Because as awareness and time and as the NDIS evolves, we all as consumers of the public who are directly, indirectly contributing towards our taxpayers' money to fund the $100 billion a year system, which is going to be $100 billion by 2032, 10 years from now. The government and also the consumers are going to want to seek compliance and also accountability on all the money being spent. And I'd love to see support coordinators actually be registered as providers as well, because if they're having that much influence over participants' life and funding and usage of funds, then they should definitely be licensed, I guess. Yeah. But we'll see where things go, I guess. And and hopefully
level 3, you have to be registered as a NDIS provider. However, one of the big barriers for that is we've done our registration for level 3. We did that 7 months ago, and we were when our audit came in, our audit was we were above benchmark in all our areas for level 3 support coordination. However, 7 months ago, that was sent in to the commission, the Quality and Safeguards Commission, and I've spoken to them recently because we're still waiting for that provider number to be provided to us. And they're telling us now the wait list is 2 years. So from the time you complete your audit to you actually get your registration is 2 years. With that sort of length of process, they're going to find a lot of companies either can't afford or are not willing to wait that long to get registration. It's all areas involved with the registration process need to be tightened up.
I've been waiting 18 months for my license. My God.
It's great to have passionate providers who really want to do the right thing, and we go through audit. And for those of you who don't know, audit process was 7 months of really hard work to actually achieve your audit, to get a high standard pass, and then be told you have to wait for 2 years to the NDIS to then put a stamp on it is really frustrating. There is a lot about the NDIS that's really frustrating for providers, not just for participants. And the biggest thing I think we need to sometimes remember that it's new, the NDIS. It's only been out there for 10 years. In the scheme of things, if you look at that, depending on the education department or against Medicare, it's a very, very new baby. And it's something that we have to all positively work towards growing and changing so that we get it to be the best when it's an adult. And the NDIS is still a child in progression so far.
Agreed. Russell, I want to ask you a question.
Hit me.
Why are you wanting to become a support coordinator? So what's your background? What's your history? Where were you and where are you going now? What's happening?
Good question. I've done a lot of things in the past. I suppose my background would have been as an outdoor educator. So I did outdoor education in uni, taking groups out to the hills, surfing, kayaking, windsurfing, all of that. And then that was back home. And then when I came over here, got into construction for a bit. That was a bad idea. And then once I got out of that, I got into support work, and in particular, sort of like community access and doing like groups, taking them out, doing the camping, doing the surfing as much as possible. And then I met Sarah through that process. And I suppose in some ways, I fell into support coordination, but now throughout doing it, it's sort of like because it's so different from what I used to do. It took me a while to get used to it, but now, like, I really enjoy it. You can really see you're not on the ground as much, but you really see the difference that you can make. You know, building a team, you might be running a team of 12 people around one participant and working all of that. And I always enjoy working out the logistics and numbers. I quite enjoy numbers. They like to joke about it in the office, but I quite enjoy breaking down the funds and making sure that it's going to be used appropriately and trying to utilize it as much as possible. Where can we use this? How can we do this? This must be a better way. And although as frustrating as the NDIS can be, and like over the last year doing this, I've seen there's so many problems with this system and trying to just work within the system and then helping the participants through it all. I mean, it's a maze, to try and navigate through and how do you do this? How do you get this done? There's so much involved. So I've really enjoyed learning it and then being able to pass on. And I suppose like being able to teach the participants as well, like let them gain their independence and they know then how to run their plan a bit better. And we're there to navigate it through. So.
Well, that's great to see you jump from the dark side of being a support worker into the light of being a support coordinator.
Yeah.
And you know what? I think the best way for our listeners to understand, or anyone in the community who understands what the SC role is, I think if you think about a football match, you have a coach, you have the players, you have the assistant coaches, you have the water boy. Everyone's working on one big team here to deliver the same outcome, which is a win for them. So a support coordinator, I think in layman's terms, really is the coach of the participant to help guide the participant into living the life they want and how they want to do it, utilizing the services and support network around them to deliver that outcome. Wouldn't you agree, Russell?
Yeah, for sure. Because you're running a big team of people around one person. So just being able to work out the logistics and make sure that they're aware of everything that's out there for them. I think like even for me, learning, there's so much out there that I didn't even know about until I became a support coordinator. And this was an option. Even as a support worker, you don't know what you're actually allowed to do with the participant. Who pays for what? Who does this? You get told very little. I went in with support worker I'd worked with a lot of people in the past, but you still don't know the ins and outs of it. You do a Cert 3 course online. Maybe you've never even met the teacher. And then suddenly you're out there one-to-one with a participant with quite high complex needs. It's kind of unmonitored to a point.
Another question for you, Russell or Sarah. I've read an article recently and, unregistered support workers, unregistered support services. There seems to be a growing trend of participants moving towards that kind of demand because of the lack of staff, lack of services, and they want to reach out to other services to help them meet those gaps in their needs of their life as a person with disability. Do you come across many care providers who are unregistered?
There's a lot out there. I mean, how long does it take to set up a company these days? You could in a Saturday evening,
But do you as a support coordination business question that? Like, hey, Mr. Participant, are you sure you want to be looked after by a support working organisation that is not registered and is possibly a startup business?
My thought on that, we do come across a lot of unregistered support providers. And I think the first thing I always do is take time to get to know them, to understand why they're doing what they're doing, to understand what barriers are there for them to become registered. And if possible, I will always try to guide and help them as well, because if you have a support worker or an OT or someone that your participant really loves to work with and really is happy with their service, then my role is not to judge that, but to facilitate that relationship in a positive way that's going to also fulfill the NDIS needs. And I guess I would rather say to someone, let's get to meet this person. Let's have a chat about where they're going. What barriers do they have? What do they need to be a successful supplier to the client? You're always going to meet people that are sort of in it for the wrong reasons. But that's not for me to judge until I have taken the time and put the effort in to get to know them. Because some of the unregistered providers are brilliant providers that just don't have either the funds or the knowledge and skills or the time to seek registration. Whilst the registration process is an amazing process, it's also very expensive. It was $8,000 from my small business that I have put out that I won't get an outcome for 2 years. So I understand that a lot of people choose not to be registered. And I think there is a space to work with those people, but I still think that some level of standardisation needs to be held for people that are still unregistered. And I think we should encourage them to grow and to do that in a successful way.
Wise words, Sarah. Thank you very much for that. Russell, I would like to ask for a favour of you. I was just thinking yesterday, just going home, like one of our staff members in our office is a trekking expert who takes people out on treks to Nepal.
Oh, excellent.
Himalayas. And I would love to donate a day or two as our sponsor for her to go out to work with a day or half a day in the rainforest or in a little, like these are disabled kids or people, so they're not going to want to go on a major trip, but like a preparation, going on a little jungle trip for 2-3 hours. I would love to know, is there any way we as a business can donate resources, time and funds to getting a bunch of people out of the comfort zone or out of their normal everyday routine of being in home only, going nowhere, to go out and spend a 3-4 hour session with a bunch of people with a expert guide or trekker, just to take them through a little trek somewhere safe and simple. Is there an opportunity for us to help donate that kind of funds and support to local communities in Gold Coast like that?
For sure there is. It would take me a moment to work out all of the logistics, but for sure we could. All it is setting up the event, and the sister company that we've got, Brave Ones Mentoring, that organizes them sorts of events. So the aim or the goal is to have groups like that doing that on a weekly basis or on a weekly basis throughout the term, and then organizing bigger trips like overnight trips or 2-day, 3-day trips, over the school holidays for the young participants, or even for the older participants, it can happen anytime, So for sure.
Well, we'd love to help contribute to that cause because, in our sector, we work with a lot of bigger organizations, developers and builders and larger groups, SDA providers. And I'm trying to get our peers to contribute more to the community. It's nice to say you're working in the sector, but it actually means much more to put your hand in your pocket and say, here's a few $1,000 for this little group of people to enjoy a day or two or a weekend away in Mount Tamborine or whatever. So I'd love to talk to you more about that and how we can help bring awareness to the community about supporting those little get-togethers with your guidance, please.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to organize and set it up. It's all about, I suppose, spreading the word out there and organizing the events, and the people will come,
Exactly. So we'll talk more about that offline another time. But anyway, so moving forwards, any words of advice from you, Sarah, about awareness to our listener base who are mostly property investors and some normal avid listeners who want to understand more about the NDIS sector as to the support coordinator position in the marketplace moving forwards, and how we as the community can help you and your business with whatever needs to be done. And please give us your thoughts.
So I think it would be good for participants to know that support coordination is something that you have to ask for. It's not automatically given. And when you look at why you're going to work with someone, take the time to get to meet the person and to actually speak to the support coordinator you're thinking about utilising. Sometimes you don't get on with people. Sometimes your preferences are different. But don't forget that we're here to provide a service for you. And if you're not happy with it, or if you don't like working with it, or don't get on with us, then you have every right to say, no, I would prefer a different system. I don't want to work with that. I would like to exercise my choice and control and do something else. The more input you have into that, the better we can do our job for you. And that's what it is about. Our job is for you. And don't forget that being a participant doesn't mean that you're also not a customer. And you deserve to have good customer service from everyone you deal with at all times.
Great words. Russell, any final words of advice from you?
Well, you're not going to get words of wisdom like that. But I suppose for me, it's all about getting out into the community and getting the participants out and being involved as much as possible. So just get out of the house to, talk to, for any participants that are listening, talk to your coordinators, sitting in a house. There's so many participants that they have a support worker that they'll just sit there for the day. They'll watch TV. Oh, you want to watch Netflix for the day? I was in still housing before, and it's just, let's just watch a series together. And I'm like, let's get out, and sometimes it takes a lot of convincing, but once you're out and about, the change, and especially when I was working in the outdoors, you see the change that comes over people just from being in the fresh air. Even if you're sitting at the beach for an hour, it makes a difference. So I think just start small and build up to a 3-day trek in the Himalayas,
Oh, I don't think Sarah's going to let you do that.
Actually, I would. We very much believe that whether or not you have a disability, your life goals should be met. And it's our job to move everything else to meet that, not expecting you to change your goals and your beliefs. It's about supporting those and making sure you can achieve them. And if that means you want to do a 3-day trek in the Himalayas, I wouldn't personally go myself because of my wheelchair, but definitely we would help you to do that because that's what we're here for.
Good. Sarah, Russell, thank you so much for your time. I would really love to come meet you at the Gold Coast. We're only in Brisbane here, and talk to you more about your ideas and your business and how we can help you guys out there.
That'd be good.
Yeah.
Yep. Fabulous. Thank you.
You've got it.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You
All right,
too.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.